Many people I know personally did not have electricity since Irma. Irma caused a lot of damage here. I have all the photos of it. It was shocking. Of course, I followed it as long as I could, given electricity, etc. And we were very lucky that it went 50 miles above the coast of north coast of Puerto Rico. Yeah. And even so, and when you look at it, what we say in Spanish, los rascos, the outer rings, caused a lot of damage. And in my apartment, personally, I'm on the 3rd floor balcony here, actually, facing the bay, and a lot of water came in. I had to, clean out for maybe for a few days the water in my apartment. Not an inch of water, And so because of this, Maria, if you prepare, this was nailing the balcony doors shut. This was buying what people say, canned goods, get some cash, put gas in the car if you have a car. Doing all that planning interrupted our school academic calendar. Is very important because the implications for University of Puerto Rico, which is already in crisis. And we had held one class between Irma and Maria of the new semester. So the first week of classes were canceled because of Irma. And this was one of those things, like if you didn't get your students' emails right away or the contact information, like we have the official information, but it was a really the semester really had not been properly started.
Right.
And the speed at which Maria came right after Irma, if you want to. Oh, the plane.
Because I don't want to miss any.
Yeah, I don't want to go too long either.
Yeah, the speed at which Irma came.
The speed at which Maria came after Irma was such that I'm no longer on Facebook. I had to take a break, but my post was, there's no way I had just dismantled my entire apartment and put it back together again. Like I put my computer in the closet, important papers, because of flooding. I didn't know if the nails were going to hold on the door. And when I look at what that Irma was, I don't think I overreacted. And it took me, 4 or 5 days to get my apartment back to normal. And then when we get another hurricane warning, actually there was Jose, if I remember correctly. And I was like, there is no effing way, excuse my New York French, that I'm going to do this again. And then Maria goes from Category 1 to Category 5. And again, anybody who is socially minded, or now I suppose anybody should care about the implications for all Puerto Ricans and all Virgin Islanders and everybody in the Caribbean who has been affected by this, Dominica, Anguilla. We can't underestimate what has happened to the British Virgin Islands, to Tortola. I think ignoring them is a big mistake. And the speed at which this went from 1 to 5, along with after Irma, really didn't give you the time. And I thought, I think I'm privileged. I know I'm privileged compared to so many people in Puerto Rico. I bought maybe 3 weeks worth of canned food. I had an electric stove with gas canisters, propane tanks. I took $300 cash out of the ATM machine before the cash was gone. I thought I prepared. Then my family, understandably, started calling me and saying, especially my sister in New Jersey, can you leave? Can you get on an airplane and leave? This is going to be torture for us. And out of consideration for my family, I really thought of leaving before Maria hit. And 2 friends of mine, I kind of hate to admit this because it's such a huge privilege to be able to do that. 2 good friends of mine, also colleagues at UPR and also longtime neighbors in Old San Juan, they had bought tickets out. And they said, Maritza, come with us. We're going to New Orleans. Come with us. And they were trying to convince me to go. And they sent me the link to the airline. And I looked at the price of the tickets, and they went, and this is something that should be outlawed. They went to $1,000 a seat in the 24 hours before Maria. And that wasn't the only reason that I hesitated. It was a reason. But I hesitated because I thought, I have a dog, I have a cat. What if my apartment floods again? It's just it has to be a split-second decision. It was by 11 a.m. the seats were sold out. And so then I couldn't leave. And I promised my family, I promised that I'll leave, as soon as I clean up my apartment and reopen the doors so it doesn't get messy, make sure my pets are well taken care of. I promised, and I'll come right afterwards. Right afterwards, the airport was closed.
Yeah.
unfathomable to me. I mean, anybody who knows the San Juan International Airport well knows it's not O'Hare, but knows this is a major international airport. It was just complete. I did have a flight purchased.
Yeah.
The prices went down drastically, like literally to $150 a seat. So I also asked myself what happened in the interim,
Yeah.
other than it looked like the humanitarian thing to do, not to charge $1,000 a seat.
Right.
Should be illegal to do that.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. I bought a ticket because there was a complete telecommunications blackout. And I guess I should talk about the aftermath, immediately. But I don't want to turn the whole interview into one question. But so much attention, understandably, has been paid to the collapse of the public electrical utility, and I would say very little, relatively speaking, to the private, very lucrative telecommunications market in Puerto Rico. Now that we're getting the nearly 5,000 death toll, almost a year later, there's no question that we can blame the death toll in part on the telecommunications collapse. You can't call 911. You can't call your daughter or neighbor to say, get me out. People who were rescued in Levittown at 2 a.m. from waters that went to the roofs of their buildings couldn't call, no. For me, I had no water and no electricity for 3 weeks, but for me, 3 weeks before I left, because then I did leave.
Oh.
For me, the lack of telecommunications was just staggering.
Yeah.
Not being able to communicate with your loved ones afterwards. I'm sure you've heard about this through other people. We've heard about it in the press. People from the diaspora in Puerto Rico weren't here, but I think maybe suffered psychically anguish, maybe worse because of that lack of communication. When I finally did get out, and I hate to admit that, but it was after 3 weeks here. Old San Juan is fairly self-contained, and again, we had a lot of trees down, but we didn't suffer a lot of structural damage. There was a lot of balconies down.
Yeah.
But there was a couple restaurants open because of because of electric generators. There was no news, no newspapers. There was one restaurant with a TV. So I would go to the bar. It closed at 5 because we had a curfew. The government enforced a curfew at 6 p.m. So the place that had a TV closed at 5. So I would rush there to watch the 5 o'clock news because we had no information about what was going on in the rest of the island. So if you read about the telecommunications collapse, the 5 municipios in the southwest corner of Puerto Rico, where Maricao is, those mayors had zero communication with the governor for the whole first week or 2 out. So I can't underestimate, and I think it should be questioned more.
Yeah.
Are we ready? Is the private telecommunications industry ready for another storm? How have they addressed the failure? I do understand they cooperated a lot to share signals afterwards in order so that once we were able to communicate, like you saw this, people spending all day looking for a signal for one bar and then answering texts, which is what I started doing, like walking around for hours to text my family. And that was one of the reasons I just did decide to leave when I did. When I left, the airport had partially opened. It still had no electricity. There were families camped out in the airport for
days and days.
Because of the telecommunications, they didn't get the cancellation. I didn't get my first cancellation. I heard about another friend having a cancellation. So then I checked online. I found a way to get online. But the airport to me was, and I'll say this, we don't want to say climate refugee just to score points for the political, I think, urgent political movement to address climate change. But it's not just scoring points. I was there with my dog under my arm. Many people were there with their dogs. It really felt like we were refugees. The airport was unbearable. I thought it was dangerous for older people.
Absolutely.
The people.
Hot, you mean?
It was a sauna.
Sweltering.
The end of September in Puerto Rico, sleeping was a challenge.
Yeah.
I opened most old San Juan buildings are literally designed for cross ventilation, and I hate to also admit what a incorrigible night owl I am, and I became 10 p.m. sleep, 6 a.m. wake up because it was so hard to sleep in the heat.
Yeah.
I have really long hair, and I would literally throw cold water bottles all over me before sleeping because the wet hair would help me sleep in the heat. It was hard to sleep in the heat. And then think about elderly people, think about ill people, again, the death toll that contributed to the death
What
toll.
about the water? I mean, because I know you were saying before that there was no water, or at least
The
clean
lack of-
drinking
the-
water. The feeling of for you, your pets. I mean, like this.
It's funny that my dog is in the interview. I prepared, so I must have had. I had maybe 20 gallons individual, not purchased, filled from empty
Yeah,
bottles.
yeah.
I hate to say that in the past often, she heard me talk about her. In the past, I've often had some water stored in the past because of the debt crisis, the deterioration in the system. We had a drought a few years behind that had large rationing. Not here, but in other parts of the municipal area. Okay. And when, again, I saved containers this high, I guess maybe 5-gallon containers. And after 3 weeks, everything that you prepared after 3 weeks, the food, the cash, everything. I made one run to the El Nuevo Dia newspaper with a friend to get newspapers. And when we came back, they gave us piles of newspapers. And when we came back to Old San Juan, we were going to deliver the newspapers to Puerto Rico Drug, which was the only pharmacy open with a generator only in morning hours. Yes.
Yeah.
Both her and I got out of her SUV with, newspaper, pile of newspapers. And the entire plaza, everybody standing in the plaza rushed to us, and we didn't bring one newspaper into the pharmacy.
Wow.
There was an
People were
information
desperate,
blackout
Desperate
for news.
And was the news? I mean, in the newspaper,
This was the first
reliable?
weeks.
I
I have to say, I read everything word for word. That's where I learned the municipal mayors didn't have communication with the governor. It was important information.
Yes.
And that's when I realized, wow, the electricity is not coming back anytime soon. I live next door to the governor's mansion. So if it's not going to come back here, this is probably one of the most important tourist points in Puerto Rico because of cruise ship traffic. I thought, wow, if it's not going to come back here, I can't even imagine the rest of the country. And so that was when I made the decision also to leave.
Yeah.
And it didn't come back here, for
more than
months.
when I came back
Right?
5 weeks later, because University of Puerto Rico opened October 30th. When I came back 5 weeks later, I came back to exactly the same Old San Juan, with the one exception that the garbage had been picked up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was shocking.
Oh my gosh.
The water situation was really scary because immediately there were reported deaths of leptospirosis, including of young people.
Yes.
And I started getting scared about the water. And actually, because I pay attention to the crisis, the debt crisis, I have been really wary about the water for some time. Because of the debt, a few years ago, I could look up the exact year, I don't have it memorized, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, the federal government stopped monitoring Puerto Rico's water. And I have been, for I think good reason, because I follow the crisis very closely, worried about the water quality. So I had already been filtering with a Brita filter,
Yeah, it's something.
even for my pets.
Yeah.
And then I thought, wow, a Brita filter is not going to cut it. And I started pricing expensive filters. And again, when you talk about inequality and the way inequality contributes literally to life or death, I was able to buy a more expensive water filter.
Yeah.
When I did leave finally to go to New York, I spent maybe the entire week, and some of you might have witnessed this on social media, and it's nothing, I'm not patting myself on the back, trying to catch up what happened, but also, posting links and, many people who I maybe never really cared much for Puerto Rico contacted me from all walks of my life, including elementary school. And so I wanted to answer them in a way in which they could immediately respond and kind of take advantage of this moment. Unfortunately, such a small window. Unfortunately, that's just the way it works.
Yeah.
When I arrived at my family's home, I stayed glued to CNN all night, watching David Bignout, who's now also a personal
Yes.
hero, a
Yes.
personal hero.
Absolutely.
And I have to say, whatever partisan politics you feel or anybody feels about Carmen Yulín, I literally cried listening to one of her interviews late at night, saying we're dying here.
Yeah, you
I
and
knew
many other
she
people,
was
yes.
not making it up.
Yeah.
there was a lot. There were fundraisers in New York City every night of the week. I couldn't go to them all.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law, who's Puerto Rican and is a pastor at a Lutheran church, Trinity Lutheran Church in Brooklyn, raised something like $15,000 in one night of a salsa concert.
Wow.
So he started asking me, where can we send this money? And I started asking people who I knew, grassroots activists.
Yeah.
And one of the top concerns were water filters. Water filters to single mothers in the countryside.
Yeah.
And the water filters that filter everything are expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, it did feel like a life or death situation.
Were your moments? I mean, even like during the storm, and I mean, is it fear and emotion that you felt a lot in those days? I mean, we've had various reactions to this.
I'll give you my personal narrative. Irma, I sat in my bed, which is the back room, so away from the, thinking, well, if the doors of the balcony don't hold, hopefully the door to the bedroom is back there. And I sat in my bed with the animals are very perceptive. They cuddled up to me, and I admit I had a beer in my hand, and I wished I had put one on the night table and had two. I brought one cold beer with me, and I was like, damn, I should have brought two. Because listening to Irma, and I have to say, for me, listening to Irma was worse than listening to Maria.
Really?
And again, it also depends on where you're located.
Yes.
I said to myself, without again being overly dramatic, this is what a Category 5 storm sounds like. I lived in Puerto Rico for 20 years, so I remember Hortensia in particular. I remember some of the other storms. I wasn't here for George's. I was in graduate school, and I wasn't here for Hugo. Hugo was before I came to the country. So I knew these were like the Andrews of recent history that kind of mark history here.
Yeah.
But I had been through bad storms here.
Yeah.
And the howl of that storm was really creepy. And so when Maria came, a friend invited me to stay with her. And she lives up the street. Her apartment is on the second floor all the way back, and it literally has no windows. That doesn't sound nice, but it's a beautiful apartment.
Yeah.
It has a big skylight.
Okay.
She has a beautiful place, and it felt safe. It felt like a bunker.
Yeah.
I brought and cats don't like moving. I brought my cat in his cat bag, and he was, as if he knew, cooperative.
Yeah. Here comes the storm.
And then again, social media, for as much as, I'm off Facebook now, and I'm very critical of the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal, and as much as we, I think, rightfully critique and worry about social engineering, et cetera, with social media, I stayed on Facebook on my phone until literally like 5:30 in the morning. It was hard to sleep. And you did get a collective sense. Of course, many people are not on social media or on cell phones or on Facebook, but everybody who I knew here in Puerto Rico, I have a lot of contacts here in Puerto Rico, we're registering a sense of trepidation, fear. I could hear, it was a different sound.
Yeah.
Once it started hitting and the lights started flickering and it was no longer able to stay on social media, its sound was different. I would say Irma sounded scarier in terms of the howl, but it sounded like we were being swallowed into the sea. And I said to the friend I was staying with, because I could hear, through the skylight, you can see where we are. We're pretty high. It's funny. I thought to myself, well, we're safe because we're behind the oldest architecture in the country, behind these, literally UNESCO World Heritage Site walls. And I thought to myself, how high can this, and then I was reading on social media, 180 mile per hour winds. I have a very, very dear friends in Caguas and in Vieques. The friend in Vieques who I consider almost family, I didn't get through to him until I was in a subway in New York City when I got through to him.
Wow.
And I cried.
That's so wild.
And they take care of a 96-year-old father at home. I was really worried about Caguas and Vieques because of my friends there and because they were reporting 180 mile per hour winds. And they were reporting, as they did with Irma, possible twisters,
Yes.
When I read that was when I told my family, get out of there, with the Irma thing. So when I heard the gurgling sound, I said to my friend, is it possible that the ocean would, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert, but I started feeling like, are we safe here? And she said, Marita, the water would never get this high. We're in a safe spot. We're on high ground.
So, Marita, could you is there a message that you think the world needs to hear? If you could sum it up, you know, what would you like the world, especially people who are not necessarily super familiar with Puerto Rico, you know, to hear regarding what's happened here as a result of Hurricane Maria? Is there like one way to summarize?
We have to keep in mind that the reason the crisis that already existed in Puerto Rico, in my opinion, is a full-blown catastrophe as a result of Hurricane Maria, is because of the debt crisis. And the debt crisis, to some extent, hinges on the colonial relationship of Puerto Rico to the United States. And I do think the average American does not think about U.S. colonial possessions. They exist elsewhere in the world as well, and they include the U.S. Virgin Islands. And of course, after David Begnaud and the media attention, I do think that now most Americans realize Puerto Ricans are citizens. I remembered when the shooting happened in Las Vegas, and I thought, wow, that means this is no longer going to be major news. And I think that we have to really take note that this is the face of climate change, that this is the face of colonialism, that debt crises may soon be coming to a place near you. And so now, you know, after Hurricane Maria, the Federal Fiscal Control Board that literally, controls the entire state budget, and it was imposed by the federal government, it's still, not only are they continuing their, I think, draconian austerity measures, for example, cutting half the budget to the University of Puerto Rico. Ask anybody in any state, oh, what would it be like if you cut half the budget of University of California, or half the budget of State University of New York, or half the budget of Rutgers University? And what would people do? What would people do if you shut down the campus in Camden, you know, which is a very poor community in New Jersey? There's a Rutgers campus there for a reason. Or other campuses that are satellite campuses or smaller campuses in other parts of public systems. The pensions are being cut. So after the storm, the Fiscal Control Board deepened their cuts because of the exodus. And this is another thing that I think the message that goes to the world. The climate crisis will be a refugee crisis. Because Puerto Ricans are citizens, we have to ask ourselves, are they refugees or aren't they? I would say that the 300,000 Puerto Ricans that left the island in the 2 months after the storm are refugees. Not because I deny their citizenship, because they're fleeing a life or death catastrophe. And Florida and many other places, whatever preparations they made to absorb that, will get ready, because, you know, all of us, this is not just about, you know, Trump getting out of the Paris climate deal, or, you know, mayors or governors in California saying, well, we'll still maintain our climate policies, friendly climate policies. This is really about, you know, all of our behavior in terms of petroleum consumption, in terms of whether or not we consider this important, whether or not it affects us directly. Hurricane Sandy in New York was actually dramatized in what we saw with the subways in Hurricane Sandy in New York, which is unfathomable. That was dramatized in the film An Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore. Al Gore had these, like, this is what will happen, and then they happened. But New York City has the money, and it is spending millions to prepare for the next one. And what about the places that don't, you know? We're all implicated in this, not just as Americans, you know, as humans. And I think the top three for me is that Puerto Rico is a colony. The debt crisis. Is your government lending money for whatever reason? And when that becomes, you know, no longer sustainable, are they going to come after your pensions? This is not just something happening far away. I think that we're seeing historical changes, like the end of pensions. And so I think what's happening in Puerto Rico could be and is being, to some extent, domesticated in the United States. And I think that all of us, you know, have a responsibility to know about this and to respond to it in some ethical way in our own lives. Sorry, it's kind of a big, broad statement.
No, that's good though. It's a good way to end, because that's kind of what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
We're responding in whatever we can.
Yeah.
Creating awareness. right? So
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
pushing people. Like I know I called Congress people and told asked people to call Congress people about the Jones Act, which
Right.
limits
Yeah.
shipping, or
Yeah.
it's very expensive to
That,
import
to me,
food in
that's
Puerto Rico.
one of the biggest
Yep.
things we can do immediately.
And it's
right?
and I hate to say it, the interests are so huge,
Yes.
Yep.
and I don't see it changing based
Right.
on my knowledge. But it is literally holding a country hostage to potential starvation. 85% of the food is imported in Puerto Rico.
Yep. We
Uh,
talked about that yesterday in Jauco. This whole idea of people have to start learning how to provide for themselves. How,
DIY,
Yep.
subsistence agriculture, period.
Yeah.
Food politics, this is ground zero
Yep.
in so many ways. You could do a whole documentary about that. Seriously, because of the way GMOs are using Puerto Rico and have used Puerto Rico historically.
Testing. Yeah.
First place
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
And also in terms of petroleum, fossil fuel imperialism. I mean, it sounds very charged, but that is what's happening in a Trump Pruitt. I don't want to say statehood because it might happen with a governor from another party, but with a colonial government here,
Yeah.
a government representing elite interests here,
Yeah.
and in cahoots with Pruitt's EPA. Puerto Rico is a place with much higher environmental damage than many other places in the United States, but I'm from New Jersey, where the pharmaceutical industry has caused its share of pharmaceutical damage. And so this is ground zero in if that's the right phrase. This is a telling place.
Yes.
In so many ways that matter not just to the nearly 4 million people here, but really should matter to everybody and may matter in terms of these things happening and widening to other communities, and to specifically vulnerable communities.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Marisa.
Yeah,
This has
thank you
been-
for this
And
project.
Samantha.
Yeah, sorry,
Thank you. You
she's-
really
she's-
cooperated.
I said her name, and she's like giggling.
But yeah, I mean, part of the tragedy was, obviously, everything is relative, but there was how many thousands of extra dogs there were in the street after
Oh
the
my
storm?
God, and cats, right? Well, the cats have developed.
David McNown interviewed a woman who got an organization that got something like 10,000 dogs. They had several to a cage. They were shipping them out. I saw this interview an hour on his
I'm
Facebook page.
hoping we can bring him to Notre Dame as part of the
Oh,
teacher.
wow. He was
would
honored
love
at the
to.
Puerto Rican Day Parade.
I know.
Yeah.
I
I'd
know.
love to bring
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be great.